today I thought I would show you some hints and tips to do with embroidery. I don't profess to be an expert embroideress. However, if you've got an embroidery hoop at home and some bits and pieces of fabric, no kits, and you want to do something fun, you can have a go at doing this.
You will need some fabric with a clear design on it, and here you can see a couple of different examples. One's a tablecloth printed with a willow pattern design, the original fabric that I'm going to be using with the teapots and teacups, and then one that's perhaps a little bit more colourful and fun with the beach houses. If you've only got quilting fabric, go with that. You will also need some excess fabric for extending your piece to go in a hoop, an embroidery hoop, some thread for stitching the two pieces of fabric together, embroidery thread, and then some sort of metallic thread. And not forgetting a good selection of needles, actually any needle, as long as it's sharp, and some scissors, and some more scissors. Oh, and snippers too, and pins.
I have a massive embroidery hoop, so the first thing I'm going to show you is how to mount your piece of fabric and put it in the hoop. So I cut out this piece earlier on, which is the same as the one in the picture at the beginning. And I absolutely love it because you've got very regular lines. You've only got two colours to work with, and it's a really nice way of just easing yourself into embroidery, but clearly it doesn't quite fit across the hoop. So this is an offcut of fabric from somebody's bed linen, I don't know. It doesn't need to be, it's nothing special. We're literally going to be extending this bit of fabric. In this instance, I want to keep as much of this as possible, because when we come to turn it into a crazy patchwork panel, it gives you more leeway on the design, it gives you more freedom. So first of all, we're just going to pin it along here just to hold it firm. I should have threaded up a needle, but hopefully it'll go right first time. And I'm going to use red thread just so you can see what I'm doing. Obviously I wouldn't normally use something so contrasty. A reasonable amount of thread. So we need a needle as well. Of course I didn't get that out either.
Just a note on needles, I ended up using a household selection. You'd think having a haberdashery shop I would have every needle known to woman. Well, I have, I just can't find them. You need something that's pointy. So a sharp, a household needle, not something you would use for tapestry or cross stitch. So not a blunt-ended needle.
So I'm just going to start from this end, reasonably large stitches.
This is just a normal running stitch all the way across the top. If you keep the piece of work as flat as possible on the table, you will find that you don't gather it up by mistake.
So we've done the first part. So obviously the piece of work that's important is the teapot. So we've got a nice lot of extra there. We'll cut off this excess here. Massive tailor's shears. And then exactly the same as we did before, I'm going to put this piece on here and then pin it on to hold it in place, and then I'm going to stitch this exactly as I did the top piece,
and then again just stitch with your running stitch until you get to the end, and just go backwards and forwards, just stitch around in a loop a couple of times just to make sure it holds it firm.
So that's that bit, and now I'm just going to trim it up just a bit. Right, so now we've extended our fabric, we can put it in the embroidery hoop. So standard wooden embroidery hoop, 2 parts with the adjustable bit. Just open it up a little. It's not ever so thick, so not too bad. Now we're going to place the work in the embroidery hoop. It's better to do it on a flat surface because then you can adjust the tension. See, it's sort of poofy. So you want it taut, but not that loose. So I'm just going to pull it a bit. And it's important to pull it on the grain line. I don't know if you can see because this is quite a slubby fabric, so you can see the grain line there. So we need to try and keep those lines straight. Just pulling this through and working it. I'm going to pull that other side. Can you hear that? That's about right. It needs to be taut, but not like a drum. And then the last bit, before we start sewing, you can see what we put underneath is in the way of our sewing. So just take a small pair of scissors. Keep pulling this, because otherwise you're going to snip through the front. Okay, now we're ready to start doing some embroidery. My main reason for doing this embroidery was to give this some texture within the piece of crazy patchwork. So you can see that it's printed with the blue, and then there's this sort of weird goldy colour here. You don't have to stitch everything. I've done like the bulk of the work across here and just picked out some different bits, and mostly it is straight lines. It's literally just complete stitches there. So first of all, this is 6-strand embroidery thread. There's 6 individual little strands here. If you've ever done a cross stitch kit, usually in the instructions it'll tell you to use 2 or 3 strands. Also, in all sewing encyclopedias ever, it tells you not to do what I just did, because you're supposed to take off 1 strand at a time and then put them back together. I don't know who's got time for that. So I've threaded my needle. I'm also going to tie a knot in the end of this. There'll be very professional embroidery people screaming out there, I know, I'm sorry. But again, because it's such a loose weave, you've got to anchor those stitches in place. So I'm just going to come up here and go back through the same hole without stitching through the knot.
So when you're doing your stitching, think about how you want to emphasize different parts of the design. On this one, it's meant to look like a quilted teapot, so I've concentrated where the lines of the design overlap each other in the corners, so you get sort of like a cross shape. And using the darkest blue, sort of matched to the print, I've emphasised those cross shapes to make it look like the really deep quilting. Obviously, if you're doing a different design that just needs some colour injecting or whatever, you know, make it up as you go along, but that's why I'm doing it this way. So when you've done as much of the flat stitching as you want to do, in this instance the dark blue, you need to use a metallic thread. There are lots and lots of different metallic threads out there. The one that I'm using here, partly because it was the one I could find, is a metallic thread for machine, but it's not 2 strands woven together or twisted together. This is a crimped metallic thread, so it won't split in the needle.
I'm going to do 2 little straight stitches, and it'll look like a little butterfly. So like a V on one side and then a V on the other side.
And also remember, when you're using metallic thread, that you need to keep the length of the thread a lot shorter than the normal embroidery thread. This is because it wears every time you pull it in and out of the fabric. Through the eye of the needle it will wear, and eventually it'll just snap and look scruffy and be generally annoying. Just be patient. Patience, stitch slowly, try and keep your tension uniform. So basically don't pull it too hard, pull it slowly through the fabric.
I've stitched in some of the gold. Normally I would finish all of the gold, but I want to show you how to do a French knot. I've got another 3 strands of embroidery thread, and I have knotted because it's a loose woven cloth. Pull it firmly, about that far away, put your needle behind the thread, wrap it around once, put it back in the same hole, hold it firmly but not too taut, and then ease your thread through. If you hold it too taut, you'll pull the whole knot to the back.
So here I am just showing you how to do a French knot again. There are several different sorts of knot. There is a bullion knot, which is where you wrap the thread round more than once. You usually stagger the stitch away from where you came up initially.
So this is what the finished article will look like when you've done the embroidery. We've only used 2 stitches on here today, but it's quite effective, and you can do as much or as little as you want to. It's just to give you an idea and a bit of confidence with embroidery, and to show you that you can use the most surprising things to make something that's something you should be a little bit proud of at the end, hopefully. This is another example that I started with the same initial fabric. So this is one of the teacups, and again I've just stuck to blue and gold. I will be showing in a couple of weeks time, hopefully, a tutorial on how to make this crazy patchwork panel. It's a completely different technique to the one that's usually taught in books, and it's a lot more accessible and a lot quicker. I've also taught this workshop lots of times, and usually as a memory piece, and I think in these sort of difficult times, doing something creative and drawing on memories of family and things like that is kind of reassuring and quite comforting. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please subscribe to my channel. Yeah, come and join us again.